Her bridesmaids tried to sabotage her wedding, and the dress shop humiliated her for being pregnant. Elena had heard stories about brides being dramatic, but no one ever warned her that the cruelty usually came from the people who were supposed to love her. The morning sunlight was soft when she pushed open the door of Delaney Bridal, a tiny boutique that smelled of perfume too strong for the space. Elena was 21, visibly pregnant, cheeks flushed with hope, carrying a printed list of simple dresses she'd saved for weeks. The bell above the door chimed. And then, the room shifted. Miss Delaney, the owner, lifted her eyes from the counter. Her expression sharpened instantly, like someone spotting a stain on a fabric she didn't want to touch. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice dripping with annoyance. Elena smiled nervously. "I'm the bride. I came to try the dresses You." The woman cut in, eyes dropping to Elena's stomach. A long, deliberate stare. Then a quiet scoff. "You should be looking for a courthouse dress," she said flatly, "not a wedding gown." The words hit Elena like a slap. I don't understand." Ms. Delaney leaned on the counter. "Sweetheart, a real wedding gown is for brides who plan things properly, not girls who show up already compromised." Elena felt her throat tighten. She tried again. "I already made an appointment. I have the confirmation." Ms. Delaney waved her hand dismissively. "You're pregnant. Nothing will fit you correctly. And frankly," her voice dropped into something cold, almost amused, "it's embarrassing for everyone involved to pretend otherwise." A couple browsing in the corner stopped and stared. Elena felt heat rise behind her eyes. She'd saved for that appointment. She'd imagined slipping into soft ivory fabric. She'd imagined feeling beautiful, even just for a moment. Instead, the owner turned away from her completely. "Come back after the baby," she said. "Or don't. Either way, a wedding like yours doesn't need a gown." Elena left the shop trembling, tears blurring the sidewalk beneath her feet, never imagining this was only the first attack she would face before her wedding. She wasn't prepared for the second one, because the next betrayal would come from her own bridesmaids. Before anything went wrong, before the dress shop humiliation, before the bridesmaid sabotage, Elena's world felt soft, hopeful, almost delicate in its simplicity. Caleb had proposed on the back porch of his parents' farmhouse, under a sky so wide it made everything feel possible. His hands shook when he held her, his voice gentle as he rested his palm on her growing belly. He told her he wanted their child to enter a home where love was a choice, not an accident. She said yes through tears that tasted like relief. Her friendships felt stable back then, too. Vera and Riley had been in her life since high school, the loud, glittery girls who made every hallway feel smaller when they walked in. Elena always admired their confidence, the way they took up space without apologizing. When she told them about the engagement, they squealed, hugged her too tightly, teased her about being the first bride of the group, and insisted on choosing the bridesmaid dresses because, according to them, Elena had no fashion sense. She laughed, thinking it was harmless. Her dreams for the wedding were modest but warm. A ceremony in the park near the riverbend. Simple flowers. Paper lanterns she planned to fold herself with her mother. A small reception in Caleb's uncle's barn, lit with string lights and mismatched chairs. Money was tight, but she didn't care. Every detail was done with love, with hands and hearts, not credit cards. But tiny cracks began to show long before the sabotage. One evening, while the three of them were flipping through color swatches, Riley said something under her breath, light, flippant, but sharp enough to sting. "Honestly, Elle, maybe you should wait until after the baby. You'll look different in photos." Vera didn't miss a beat, adding, "Yeah, fitted dresses won't even work anymore. Might as well pick something loose." Elena laughed, because she was used to laughing things off. But inside, something tightened. Their tone didn't sound like teasing. It sounded like judgment dressed as concern. That night, Caleb held her hands, grounding her as always. He told her she didn't need anyone's approval to be a bride, that her pregnancy wasn't a flaw but a beginning. She believed him. She wanted to believe her friends, too. But the truth was already moving toward her, quiet as footsteps in the dark. She just didn't know the dress wouldn't be the only thing they would try to ruin. Elena always imagined planning a wedding would bring people closer. But the more she shared her ideas, the more she felt something cold and strange growing in the spaces between her friendships. It began subtly. Vera and Riley started acting like the wedding belonged to them. Whenever Elena mentioned wanting something simple, the two exchanged glances, the kind loaded with judgment. "You're really going with that color?" Vera asked once, holding a fabric swatch like it was contaminated. Riley shrugged. "It's your wedding, I guess. But don't you want it to look elevated?" Elena laughed weakly, hoping it was a joke. It wasn't. Their opinions grew sharper, disguised as help. Their tone shifted from playful to patronizing. And every time Elena brought up the budget, a budget she and Caleb were respectfully sticking to, the girls groaned dramatically. "Ugh, fine," Vera would mutter. "I guess we'll make it work with whatever you can afford." Riley added one night, "I'm just saying, if I were pregnant on my wedding day, I'd at least make sure everything else looked flawless." Elena didn't know how to respond to that. So she didn't. Caleb noticed the change immediately. "You don't owe them a luxury wedding," he told her, rubbing her shoulders. "This day is about us, not them." But it wasn't just the bridesmaids. Her own mother, overwhelmed by gossip from relatives, began dropping hints she didn't realize were painful. "Maybe it would be easier if you waited until after the baby," she said. "You'll look tired in photos. People will talk." Elena stayed quiet, fingers tracing her growing belly. She was already fighting to feel beautiful. She didn't need the world helping her lose. But what hurt the most was the way Vera's mother, a woman who had known Elena since childhood, whispered at a family barbecue. "With the baby coming so soon, dear, wouldn't a courthouse wedding make more sense? Why force something that isn't meant to be?" Elena stood frozen, plastic cup trembling in her hand. Riley didn't defend her. Vera didn't speak. They just exchanged another one of those glances, the kind that said they agreed. Slowly, the excitement she once felt began to shrink. She started second-guessing everything. Her dress, her body, her choices, her right to celebrate love at all. And although she didn't know it yet, the girls weren't done. The dress shop incident was only phase 1. Phase 2 was already brewing, quietly, maliciously, in the whispers they shared behind her back. Because while Elena was trying to hold her life together, her bridesmaids were planning something she never imagined friends could do. They weren't just judging her. They were preparing to sabotage her wedding altogether. The afternoon after the humiliating dress shop encounter, Elena sat on her bed holding her swollen belly with one hand and wiping tears with the other. She didn't know what hurt more, the words Ms. Delaney had thrown at her, or the fact that they echoed the things her own friends had been hinting at for weeks. She needed comfort, support, someone to remind her she deserved joy. So she called Vera and Riley. A mistake she would regret. "Hey," Elena whispered, trying to keep her voice steady. "Can I talk to you both? Something happened today." The girls arrived together, as always, wearing dramatic eyeshadow and dramatic expressions, the kind they pulled out whenever they wanted to look like supportive friends without actually being supportive. Elena explained everything, the insults, the humiliation, the shop owner treating her like trash. When she finished, she waited. For comfort. For outrage. For friendship. Instead, Vera let out a slow sigh. "Well, I mean, she wasn't wrong about everything." Elena blinked. "What?" Riley sat beside her, placing a hand on Elena's knee like she was consoling a child. "Elena," she said gently, "you are going to look different in a wedding dress. You're pregnant. It's just reality." Vera chimed in. Maybe she was harsh, but maybe she was trying to help. "You don't want to feel embarrassed on your wedding day." Embarrassed. That word again. From the people who were supposed to stand beside her at the altar. Riley shrugged lightly. "Honestly, it might be easier to wait until after the baby. You'd have more energy. Better photos. A better dress." Elena felt something crumble inside her. "This is my wedding," she whispered. "I want this. I want to marry Caleb now." Vera exchanged another glance with Riley, the one that always made Elena feel like a child being judged by adults. "If you insist," Vera said, raising her brows. "But don't expect the rest of us to pretend everything looks perfect." Perfect. Another word that didn't belong to Elena's life. Riley added, "By the way, we already picked the bridesmaid dress style. It's non-refundable, so just say yes." Elena swallowed hard. "Can I at least see it?" Vera pulled up a photo on her phone. The dress was hideous, outdated, unflattering, and expensive. Elena forced a smile. "It's a little different. It's classy," Vera snapped. "Something your wedding desperately needs." And that's when it hit her. They weren't trying to help. They weren't trying to protect her. They were punishing her for getting pregnant, for getting engaged first, for wanting something meaningful without their approval. As they left her apartment, Riley said casually, "We'll handle the rest of the dress stuff. Don't stress your little pregnant head." Elena sat in stunned silence. That sentence was wrong. Dangerously wrong. Because she had no idea that giving them control over the dresses would lead to the biggest betrayal yet. One that wouldn't simply hurt her feelings, but nearly destroy her wedding altogether. The dress shop incident should have been the worst part of the day. But humiliation has a way of echoing, bouncing off old wounds, finding new ones, settling in places you didn't know could ache. That evening, Elena sat alone in her small living room, the air too still, her chest too tight. The words Ms. Delaney had thrown at her kept replaying like a cruel mantra. Pregnant brides always regret their photos. No dress hides a mistake. Go to a courthouse. Spare yourself the embarrassment. Elena pressed her hands to her belly, tears falling quietly into the fabric of her shirt. She wasn't embarrassed of her child. She wasn't ashamed of Caleb. She wasn't hiding. But somehow, the world kept telling her she should be. Caleb arrived minutes later, breathless, having rushed over the second she texted him she was home. When he saw her face, saw the way her shoulders shook, he knelt in front of her without a word. "Elena," he whispered, wiping her tears gently. "What happened?" She told him everything, from the moment the shop owner's eyes scanned her body like an insult, to the way she felt small and stupid for believing she deserved a beautiful dress at all. Caleb's jaw clenched. His eyes darkened. "No one," he said softly but firmly, "talks to the mother of my child like that." His anger wasn't loud. It was protective. Controlled. The kind that wraps around someone instead of exploding. For a moment, Elena felt safe. But then her phone buzzed. "Vera. Riley." A flood of messages lit up the screen. "Just checking if you calmed down. You were kind of dramatic earlier. You can't cry about every little thing. Once the wedding is over, you're gonna laugh at all this." Elena stared at the words, feeling sick. Caleb leaned closer. "You don't have to read that." But she did. Because some part of her hoped, still, that her friends would care. They didn't. A voicemail arrived next. It was Vera's voice, low and annoyed. "If you're this emotional now, imagine the wedding day. Maybe Ms. Delaney was right, maybe this is all too much for you." Elena dropped the phone as if it had burned her. Caleb picked it up, listening silently. When it ended, he closed his eyes, breathing slowly, trying to keep himself from saying something he couldn't take back. "Elena," he murmured, "you don't deserve any of this. If people can't support you, they don't belong anywhere near our wedding." She nodded, but her heart felt heavy, tangled with guilt she didn't own. Because even though Caleb was right, she still loved those girls. Still trusted them. Still didn't want to believe they meant harm. But the breaking point didn't come from the dress shop. Or the messages. Or the carelessly cruel voicemail. It came the next afternoon. Elena returned to the shop, not the cruel one, but a different boutique, hoping for a second chance, for someone who would see her as a bride instead of a mistake. She walked in with a polite smile and said softly, "I'm looking for a wedding dress." The consultant smiled warmly. "Congratulations. When is your wedding?" Elena opened her mouth to answer. But the woman's eyes dropped to Elena's belly. The smile faded. "Oh," she said. Just that one syllable, flat, judgmental, enough to knock the air from Elena's lungs. "You should have told us. Our fitted gowns aren't designed for your situation." "My situation?" The words hit harder than anything Ms. Delaney had said. Elena whispered, "I'm so sorry," as if she'd done something wrong, and left before anyone could stop her. She didn't make it to her car before the tears came loud, uncontrollable, the kind that shake the body and hollow the soul. This was supposed to be a joyful time. A celebration. A beginning. Instead, people treated her pregnancy like a stain. Like she was ruining her own wedding by existing in her own body. She cried until her throat hurt. And somewhere between one sob and the next, she promised herself something. No matter what anyone said, she would marry Caleb. She would wear a dress. She would walk down that aisle with her child growing inside her, not as a burden, but as love. But Elena had no idea that while she was falling apart in a parking lot, her bridesmaids were setting the final piece of their sabotage into motion. Phase 3. The one she never saw coming. Elena didn't go home right away. She drove to the park near her apartment and sat on a bench while the afternoon sun dipped behind the trees, painting the world in soft gold that felt far kinder than any person had been to her lately. She wiped her face, trying to steady her breathing. She didn't want Caleb to worry any more than he already did. She didn't want her mother to say something unintentionally hurtful. And she certainly didn't want to talk to Vera and Riley. But she didn't have to, because they reached out first. A text from Vera popped up. "Still upset? You really need to stop taking everything so personally." Followed by one from Riley. "We're doing our best to help you. You're the one making everything dramatic." Elena stared at the messages, her stomach twisting. Earlier, she might have tried to defend herself. Explain. Apologize for being emotional. But not this time. She put her phone on silent and drove home. She didn't tell Caleb. She didn't want to burden him with more negativity. Instead, she showered, put on soft pajamas, and tried to feel normal for a moment. But peace didn't last long. The next morning, she arrived at her apartment door with a folded flyer taped to it. She opened it. It was the ad for the bridesmaid dresses Vera and Riley had chosen, with a note written in thick marker. "You're lucky we even found something that will make your wedding look decent." No signature. But she didn't need one. She sank onto the floor, the paper trembling in her hands. It wasn't teasing anymore. It wasn't misguided advice. It wasn't moodiness. It was venom. And for the first time, Elena wondered if these women were her friends at all, or if they had simply been waiting for a chance to feel superior, to punish her for stepping into a life they wanted for themselves. Still, she tried to be hopeful. Tried to assume things would calm down. But she didn't know the truth. Vera and Riley had already crossed a line she didn't even know existed. At the bridal shop where they bought their dresses, they had told the staff, "Elena canceled her wedding. We need full refunds." They said it with confidence, as if they were speaking for her, as if her life belonged to them. When the clerk hesitated, they escalated, raising their voices, causing a scene, accusing the shop of stealing. The confrontation grew so wild that someone in the store called security. Security called the police. The girls didn't care. They doubled down, saying Elena was unstable, emotional, unfit to get married. They were escorted out. And Elena? She had no idea any of it had happened. Not until later that afternoon, when her phone finally rang. An unfamiliar number. A polite, hesitant voice. "Hi, is this Elena? I'm calling from Silver Bell Bridal. We just wanted to verify that you did, in fact, cancel your wedding and request refunds for all bridesmaid dresses." For a moment, Elena couldn't speak. Her heart stopped, then raced, then stopped again. "What?" she whispered. "We received 2 women claiming to be acting on your behalf," the woman said carefully. "We just wanted to confirm before processing anything." Elena felt her throat close. They weren't just mean. They weren't just judgmental. They weren't just insensitive. They were trying to dismantle her wedding from the inside. Piece by piece. Dress by dress. Lie by lie. She sank onto her couch, hand pressed to her chest. "I didn't cancel anything," she said softly. "And they had no right to say that." "We suspected as much," the clerk replied gently. "Their behavior was volatile." Volatile. A polite word for unhinged. Elena thanked her, hung up and sat in silence, listening to her heartbeat thud painfully in her ears. She had been betrayed. Not by strangers. Not by jealous coworkers. But by the women she once believed would stand beside her as she promised her life to Caleb. The first tear fell quietly. Then another. She wasn't crying because she felt weak. She was crying because she finally understood. They didn't just want to embarrass her. They wanted her wedding to fail entirely. Elena didn't sleep that night. She lay awake replaying every moment of the past few months, every comment, every glance, every joke that landed like a blade. It wasn't random. It wasn't accidental. It was a pattern she had ignored because she wanted to believe the best in people who didn't deserve that kind of faith. By dawn, she made a decision. She needed to know everything. Not guesses. Not feelings. Facts. So she began with the simplest step. She called the bridal shop back. Her voice trembled as she asked for details, and the woman on the other end gently told her everything: the yelling, the fake cancellation, the police involvement. Elena closed her eyes, heart pounding. "What exactly did they say?" she asked. "Mostly that you were overwhelmed," the woman said. "That you were too emotional to handle the wedding. That you'd asked them to handle all dress matters because you couldn't be trusted to make decisions." Elena almost dropped the phone. Couldn't be trusted. The same phrase Ms. Delaney used. The same sentiment they hinted at after every decision Elena made. It all connected now. Ugly and unmistakable. Once the call ended, Elena pulled out her laptop and began going through messages, receipts, timelines. She wrote everything down, cross-referencing dates, matching their excuses with what Caleb remembered, matching their errands with the moments they went missing. The pattern was sickeningly clear. They had been undermining her for months. Subtly at first. Then boldly. Then viciously. Riley telling her she looked too tired for wedding photos. Vera insisting they choose dresses without her input. Both girls forgetting to include her in planning decisions. Their mothers whispering gossip that sounded rehearsed. And then the sabotage stretched further. A message from a mutual acquaintance popped into her inbox that morning. "Hey, this might be awkward, but Vera and Riley have been telling people your wedding won't happen. They said Caleb is getting cold feet. Just wanted to check if you're okay." Elena's stomach flipped. They weren't just attacking her. They were attacking Caleb too. Her relationship. Her reputation. Her right to celebrate love at all. She sat very still for a long moment, breath uneasy. Then she picked up her phone and called her mother. She didn't tell her everything, not yet, but she asked one simple question. "Did Vera's mom say anything to you about my wedding?" Her mother hesitated, then admitted quietly. "She said she was worried. She said you were making a mistake, that Caleb would feel pressured." A pause. "Sweetheart, I didn't want to upset you." Elena felt a cold clarity settle into her bones. They hadn't been gossiping. They'd been campaigning. Against her. Against her happiness. Against her future. And then, as if fate wanted to confirm the truth, her phone vibrated with a voicemail notification. It was Riley. No sweetness. No fake support. Just her voice, low and angry. "If you can't handle planning a wedding, maybe you shouldn't be having one." That was it. The final crack. Elena pressed a hand to her belly. "This wedding is happening," she whispered. "And you won't be part of it." She wasn't angry anymore. Anger burns hot and fast. This was something colder. Sharper. Cleaner. She finally saw them for who they were. And she finally knew what she needed to do next. Elena didn't rush into confrontation. She didn't scream, didn't send paragraphs, didn't beg for explanations that would only be twisted into more knives. Instead, she did something far more powerful. She chose silence. For the rest of the day, she ignored every message from Vera and Riley. Ignored their little texts. Ignored the fake concern. Ignored the guilt trips. And every time her phone buzzed, Caleb noticed the way her jaw tightened. "Elena," he said gently, "talk to me." So she did. Not all at once, she didn't have the energy for that, but piece by piece, in quiet broken sentences that revealed a truth he didn't expect. The dress shop humiliation. The sabotage. The lies. The fake cancellation. the voicemail accusing her of being unstable. By the time she finished, Caleb looked like someone had punched him. "Elena," he breathed. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I didn't want to cause problems," she whispered. "Because I kept thinking they'd stop." He cupped her face with both hands. "You are not the problem," he said. "They are." And just like that, something inside her finally unlocked. She wasn't overreacting. She wasn't imagining it. She wasn't being emotional. She was being mistreated. Caleb didn't wait another minute. "Call the venue," he said. "Call the photographer. Call everyone. Tell them no one speaks for us except us." They spent the next hour confirming every detail, the date, the guest list, the dress orders, ensuring nothing else had been tampered with. Then came the hardest part. Elena took a deep breath, opened her bridesmaid group chat, and typed slowly, her hands steady for the first time in weeks. "I'm removing you both from the wedding. Your behavior has crossed every boundary. I don't want you involved in any part of my life going forward." She didn't add insults. She didn't explain. She didn't justify. Sometimes simplicity is the sharpest blade. Almost immediately, the replies exploded. "Are you serious right now?" Riley. "Wow, so ungrateful." Vera. "You're choosing him over your friends? You're being hormonal. You're ruining your own wedding. You'll regret this when he leaves you." Elena read each message slowly. And then she left the group. Blocked them both. Her hands trembled at first, then steadied. Her heart pounded, then softened. Her breath shook, then evened out. For the first time, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Control. She wasn't done grieving the friendship. She wasn't done hurting. But she wasn't theirs to break anymore. The next morning, Elena woke up feeling lighter, not healed, not fully okay, but free from the grip of people who had been slowly poisoning her life. She expected to feel lonely. But something surprising happened instead. People showed up. Not the loud ones. Not the dramatic ones. Not the women who treated friendship like a performance. Real people. Her coworker Dana texted. "I heard about the drama. If you need help with anything, I'm here." Her cousin Mia called and said, "I'd be honored to stand with you. Just say the word." Even Caleb's sister, someone Elena barely knew, sent her a quiet message. "I know how hard pregnancy is. If you need dresses, flowers, or someone to sit with you and vent, I'm in." The world hadn't turned against her. Only two people had. And those two had simply been loud enough to make her forget the rest of humanity existed. She met Mia and Dana that afternoon to show them the original bridesmaid dress colors she'd chosen: soft lavender, warm champagne tones, nothing extravagant, just simple and beautiful. Both women gasped the moment they saw the palette. "Elena," Mia said, "this is gorgeous. Why didn't you show us this sooner?" She laughed, a tiny, tired sound. "I was too busy trying to please people who didn't care." Dana shook her head. "Well, now you're surrounded by people who do." They spent the rest of the afternoon browsing dresses, eating ice cream, laughing at baby names that sounded like medieval curses. For the first time in months, Elena felt safe. That night, Caleb wrapped his arms around her as they lay in bed. "You did the right thing," he whispered into her hair. "You didn't lose anything today. You made space for better people." She rested her hand on her belly. "I want our child to grow up around people who love them," she murmured. "Not people who secretly hate me." Caleb kissed her shoulder softly. "They will," he said. "Because you're choosing differently now." Elena closed her eyes, letting the truth of that sink in. This wasn't just about removing toxic friends. It was about rewriting the foundation of the life she was stepping into. Tomorrow, she'd pick out new dresses. Tomorrow, she'd finalize the ceremony details. Tomorrow, she'd rebuild everything that was nearly ruined. But tonight? Tonight she rested. Not because she was weak, but because she was finally done fighting the wrong enemies. Elena didn't begin healing in a straight line. Recovery rarely chooses clean timing. Some days, she woke up feeling light again, like the world hadn't cracked beneath her feet, like her wedding was still something sacred instead of something people tried to destroy. Other days, she felt the weight of everything, the shop humiliation replaying in her mind, the betrayal of women she once trusted, the constant fear that someone else would try to take something from her. But she kept going. She stopped waiting for apologies that would never come and leaned into the quiet places that felt safe. Her mother helped her sew simple decorations for the barn. Caleb fixed loose floorboards in the aisle for her. They laughed more now, not because things were easy, but because they were choosing to make beauty out of scraps. Her coworker Mara, the one with auburn curls that bounced when she talked, began checking on her every morning. "Show me today's progress," she'd say, sitting on the edge of Elena's desk. It became a ritual, gentle, grounding, honest. Mara didn't treat her like she was broken. She treated her like she was surviving. And Elena needed that. Meanwhile, her cousin Lila, soft-spoken, with short chestnut hair and a calming aura, drove nearly an hour every weekend to help with the wedding crafts. She never mentioned Vera or Riley, never asked for details, never pried. She simply sat beside Elena with a glue gun and a smile, as if rebuilding a wedding together was the simplest, kindest act in the world. The two of them, without ever asking for the title, became the new bridesmaids. Elena didn't announce it. She didn't make a dramatic speech. She just quietly replaced the women who had tried to tear her life apart with women who actually showed up. And as the weeks passed, her world slowly rearranged itself. There were moments of doubt, late at night when she folded baby clothes and wondered whether the whispers in the dress shop might have been right, whether she really deserved a wedding at all. But then Caleb would kneel in front of her, kiss her belly, and say, "We already have everything we need." And she believed him again. The wedding was drawing close, and for the first time in months, the fear around her wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from the gap left behind, the silence where her friends once stood. She didn't know it yet, but their absence wasn't just distance. It was preparation. Because while Elena was slowly rebuilding her life, Vera and Riley were sharpening their next move. And the damage they were about to cause would hit closer than clothing racks or snide comments. This time, their sabotage would come for her wedding itself. The shift began quietly, not with grand gestures, but with small, careful moments that worked like stitches closing an old wound. Mara became more than a coworker. She became a steady presence in Elena's days, showing up with iced tea during long afternoons, sending late-night messages checking in, reminding her that she wasn't walking this road alone. Lila, too, became a constant. She had a way of making the simplest tasks feel meaningful. When they sat on the barn floor arranging centerpieces, Lila nudged Elena and whispered, "You look happier now." And Elena realized she was. She had stopped waiting for the old versions of her life to return. She was letting new ones form, slower, softer, more intentional. Caleb noticed the shift, too. He often stepped back during planning days, watching Elena laugh with her new bridesmaids, pride glowing in his eyes. He never said it out loud, but the relief on his face was unmistakable. He had watched her crumble. Now he was watching her rebuild. One evening, while they sat on the back porch, fireflies flickering around them, he slipped his hand into hers. "I like seeing you with people who don't take advantage of you," he said quietly. Elena leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the truth settle deep. For the first time since the chaos began, the dress shop humiliation, the whispered judgments, the deliberate sabotage, she felt surrounded by the right people. Not perfect people. Not loud or glamorous ones. But the ones who actually cared. And as the wedding neared, Elena felt something unexpected rise inside her. Hope. Not naive hope, the fragile kind she had before everything fell apart. But a wiser hope, shaped by everything she survived. She didn't need Vera and Riley. She didn't need Delaney Bridal. She didn't need anyone's approval but her own. She had Caleb. She had family. She had two women who showed up for her every single day. She had a baby whose heartbeat reminded her she was building a future worth protecting. But while Elena's world was expanding with new love, Vera and Riley's world was shrinking. And their next decision, born of jealousy, resentment, and bitterness, would collide directly with the life Elena was fighting so hard to rebuild. The storm wasn't over. But this time, Elena had something she didn't have before. People who would stand with her, instead of against her. When the next hit came, Elena never expected her life to feel calm again, not after the humiliation, the betrayal, the way her heart had cracked in places she didn't know could break. But slowly, quietly, things began to fall back into place. Not perfectly, not instantly, but beautifully in their own uneven rhythm. The wedding decorations filled the barn one piece at a time: paper lanterns, soft greenery, mason jars, lilac painted by hand. Mara helped Elena design the layout, mapping where every table, candle, and string light would go. Caleb's uncles showed up on weekends, building the wooden arch she'd dreamed of. The barn, once dusty and bare, began to glow from the inside. Elena walked through it one afternoon, fingertips brushing the beams, her belly rounding beneath her dress, and for the first time she whispered to herself, "This is really happening." Her mother cried the first time she saw the nearly finished setup. "You built this," she whispered. "After everything, you built this." And it was true. Elena's life wasn't just intact, it was stronger than before. Her wedding wasn't grand or expensive, but it was filled with hands that loved her, with choices that were hers, with a future she had worked to reclaim. The vindication came quietly. People who had heard rumors about the dress shop incident began sending her messages: old classmates, neighbors, even strangers, telling her they had been mistreated there, too. Her one small online review sparked dozens more. Within months, Delaney Bridal's reputation crumbled. Clients canceled appointments. Vendors pulled away. Eventually, the doors closed for good. Elena didn't celebrate it. She didn't need to. The shop owner had humiliated her in front of strangers. But the universe handled the rest. As for her bridesmaids, her former bridesmaids, the rumors of what they'd done at the boutique began spreading, too. Not because Elena told anyone, but because the store's employees certainly did. The staff described the screaming, the lies, the police escort. People whispered. Judgment shifted. Suddenly Vera and Riley weren't the glamorous girls everyone wanted to impress. They were the cautionary tale. Meanwhile, Elena's world was blooming. The barn wedding felt real. Her baby's heartbeat felt steady and strong. Her relationship with Caleb deepened into something quieter, steadier, unshakable. One evening, as they decorated the arch with soft white ribbon, Caleb paused, brushed hair from her cheek, and said, "You deserved better than everything they did to you. But look at what you made anyway." Her throat tightened. Not from pain this time, but from gratitude. She hadn't needed revenge. She hadn't needed confrontation. She hadn't even needed them to see her shine. Her happiness was the milestone. Her peace was the miracle. Her wedding, finally within reach, was the truest vindication of all. But while Elena was stepping into her future, Vera and Riley were stumbling deeper into the consequences of their own choices. And their downfall wasn't over yet. People like Vera and Riley believe they're untouchable, that their beauty makes them forgiven. Their confidence makes them credible. Their attitude makes them powerful. But power built on cruelty always dissolves. And that's exactly what happened. After the boutique incident, the dress shop staff didn't hold back when the police arrived. They documented everything: the lies, the fake cancellations, the attempt to take money Elena hadn't authorized. Word spread quickly. First among local vendors. Then among mutual friends. Then among their own families. Suddenly, the girls who once dominated every room became the girls people avoided at gatherings. The girls who used to receive compliments now received sidelong glances. The girls who once bragged about fashion sense became the ones mocked for throwing tantrums in a bridal store. Vera's mother, who had once suggested Elena's wedding shouldn't even happen, found herself defending her daughter's behavior at dinners, embarrassed and tired. Riley's workplace heard about the incident through someone who recognized her in the police report. The HR whispers grew louder. Her boss pulled her aside to discuss professionalism and public conduct. Their circle shrank. Their invitations stopped coming. The attention they used to crave slid away from them like sand through fingers. And worse than the public embarrassment was the private bitterness. They blamed Elena for everything. Not their own jealousy. Not their sabotage. Not the cruelty they had inflicted. They blamed her for making them look bad. For being too sensitive. for getting pregnant and ruining the vibe. They never admitted, not even to themselves, that the truth was simpler. Elena outgrew them, and they hated that. When the wedding date approached, they expected, truly expected, to be invited again. They believed time would erase their actions, that Elena would come crawling back. She didn't. They weren't invited, not even as guests. And when photos of the wedding began circulating, soft, beautiful, filled with warmth, Vera and Riley felt something unfamiliar. Regret. Not for hurting Elena, but for losing their access to her life. For losing the spotlight they used to borrow from her. For being replaced by people who treated her with kindness. 24 years later, their lives would look nothing like the one Elena built. But the beginning of their downfall started here, with the first consequences they had ever actually faced. Elena, meanwhile, was only getting closer to the best day of her life. The day her new future would begin. The morning of the wedding felt like the world itself was holding its breath. Sunlight spilled softly through the barn windows as Elena stood in front of a mirror framed with wildflowers, her long light, brown hair falling in loose waves over her shoulders, her pale green eyes glowing with a kind of peace she hadn't felt in months. Her dress wasn't from a fancy boutique. It wasn't designer. It wasn't expensive. It was simple. Ivory. Soft. Altered lovingly by her mother and Lila's talented hands to fit her changing body perfectly. It made her look like she was stepping into the most fragile, beautiful chapter of her life. "Caleb's going to lose his mind when he sees you," Lila whispered, fastening the last button. Elena laughed, quiet, genuine, the sound of someone who had finally learned the difference between being loved loudly and being loved truly. Outside, the barn glowed with warm lights, candles, greenery, the wooden arch wrapped in ribbons Caleb had tied himself. Guests took their seats, murmuring with anticipation. But there was an undercurrent in the air. A shift. A hush. A tension. People had heard whispers. They knew Elena had replaced her bridesmaids. They knew this wedding had nearly been destroyed. And right as the ceremony was about to begin, two familiar figures appeared at the property entrance. Vera. Riley. Dressed in pastel gowns that didn't match the new bridesmaids' colors. Hair perfectly styled. Faces tight with forced smiles. They hadn't been invited. They knew they weren't welcome. But toxic people always believe they can rewrite a story simply by showing up. Lila spotted them through the window. "You have got to be kidding me." Elena turned her head slightly, catching sight of them in the distance. For a split second, she felt her heart drop. A reflex from old wounds. But then, Caleb appeared just outside the barn doors, adjusting his jacket, looking calm, grounded, entirely hers. He didn't see Vera and Riley yet. He only saw the final details of the day he'd been building with his bare hands. And the moment Elena looked at him, her world steadied. This wasn't about them. It never had been. Still, the guests began whispering louder as the two women made their way closer, clearly expecting to be greeted, forgiven, absorbed back into the spotlight. Mara and Lila stepped outside, blocking their path. "You two need to leave," Mara said, her voice low but firm. Vera scoffed. "We're her friends." "You were," Lila corrected. "Now you're just uninvited." Riley crossed her arms. "This is ridiculous. Elena's too nice to keep us out." Inside the barn, Elena took a slow breath, smoothing her dress, gathering her courage. Lila returned to her side. "They're trying to get in," she whispered. Elena paused, then shook her head. "No, this day is mine." And with that, she walked toward the barn entrance, not to confront, not to fight, but to reclaim the moment that almost didn't happen. She stepped outside just enough for her voice to carry. Vera and Riley turned sharply. "Elena." Riley forced a bright smile, stepping forward. "We came to support you. We thought." "You shouldn't be here," Elena said gently. The firmness in her voice froze them. "This is my wedding. And you don't get to walk into something you tried to destroy." Guests watched through the barn doors, stunned by her calm. Vera's face tensed. Riley's eyes widened. "Elena, we made a mistake," Vera stammered. "Multiple," Elena corrected softly. And I hope someday you grow from it. But growth won't happen here. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't humiliate them. She simply closed the door to a chapter that had been hurting her for too long. Please leave, she finished. And for the first time in their lives, the girls had no choice but to turn around. Past the curious guests, past the quiet whispers, past the future they were never meant to ruin. Elena stepped back inside, heart steady, breath even. Outside the barn, Vera and Riley's footsteps faded away. Inside, the music began. And Elena walked down the aisle toward the life they could never tarnish. The barn doors opened slowly. Warm light bathed the aisle, illuminating the soft wooden floor, the lanterns glowing like stars, and Caleb standing beneath the arch, eyes widening the moment he saw her. Elena moved toward him, her heart steady, her hand resting gently on her belly. Every step felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. Guests watched with full, quiet admiration. Not pity, not curiosity, respect. Because they all knew, in one way or another, what she had survived to get here. When Elena reached the altar, Caleb took her hands, his voice almost a whisper. You look like everything I ever hoped for. Tears filled her eyes, but not from grief this time. From becoming. The officiant began the ceremony, speaking warmly about love, foundation, trust. Elena felt each word settle into her chest like a promise she could finally believe in. But halfway through his speech, the officiant paused. He glanced toward the audience with a knowing smile, then back at Elena. I'd like to acknowledge something, he said gently. Weddings are never just celebrations. They're triumphs. Especially when the couple has had to protect their love from challenges, from judgment, from people who didn't want to see them standing here today. The room shifted. Soft murmurs, nods, emotional glances. Elena felt her breath catch. It wasn't a public dragging. It wasn't cruel. It was recognition. Validation. The truth she had carried alone for far too long. Caleb squeezed her hands. You chose the people who truly love you, the officiant continued. And that is what makes today a victory. Several guests wiped tears. Elena's mother pressed a hand to her heart. Mara and Lila stood like pillars of quiet strength behind her. Caleb spoke his vows with a steady, trembling voice. I loved you before I knew how to love anything. And I'll stand by you in joy and struggle, in every storm life tries to send our way. You and our baby are my home. Elena's vows came out softer, almost airy, but full of truth. You choose me in every moment that matters. And I choose you. Today, tomorrow, and in every version of life we're given. When they kissed, the entire room exhaled as though they'd all been holding the moment for her. The sunlight, the flowers, the vows. It all felt like the universe stitching her heart closed again, one delicate thread at a time. There was no bitterness left. No revenge. No shadow of the women who tried to tear her down. Just love. Just family. Just a future finally safe in her hands. And outside, far away from the celebration they never deserved to attend, Vera and Riley disappeared into their own silence, watching a life unfold without them. Elena stepped into the reception not as the girl who had been humiliated, judged, or betrayed, but as the woman who had risen anyway. The reception unfolded like a warm exhale. The barn glowed with string lights, mismatched wooden tables, wildflowers arranged in mason jars, and the soft hum of music floating through the rafters. Children danced near the dessert table. Friends clinked glasses. Laughter filled corners that had once held fear. And Elena glowed. Not because of the dress. Not because of the makeup. But because her heart finally felt safe. Caleb stayed close, his hand brushing hers every few minutes like a reminder that she wasn't alone in this world, not anymore, not ever again. He introduced her proudly to relatives, friends, co-workers. Every time he said, "my wife," his voice carried a reverent softness that made her stomach flutter. Yet as the evening wound down and guests wandered outside to the fire pit, Elena stepped away for a moment, needing air, needing solitude. She walked to the quiet edge of the property, where the grass met the wooden fence Caleb had painted last summer. Fireflies blinked softly in the dusk. The sky was streaked with lavender and gold. She rested both hands on her belly. Her child kicked gently, almost as if responding to the steady rhythm of her breathing. "You're safe," she whispered. "We're safe." Footsteps approached, slow, careful. Not intrusive. Caleb. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Tired?" he murmured. "A little. You want to slip out early? We can disappear before they notice." Elena smiled. "We can't leave our own wedding." "We can if you want to," he said softly. "Tonight is about us, not the timeline." Her eyes stung, this time from gratitude, not sadness. "I just needed a minute," she admitted. "After everything. I think part of me didn't believe today would really happen." Caleb kissed her temple. "You made it happen. You fought for this. For us." She leaned back into him, letting the warmth of his chest settle her. The truth was simple. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need apologies. She didn't need closure from the people who had hurt her. Her closure was standing right beside her. Her closure was inside her, kicking softly. Her closure was the life she had built from the ruins. "I'm happy," she whispered. And she meant it. Caleb squeezed her hands. "Good," he said. "You deserve to be." They stood there in the quiet of their new beginning, the barn glowing behind them like a heartbeat. For the first time in months, Elena felt whole. Not because the pain disappeared, but because it no longer controlled her. The past hadn't won. Cruelty hadn't won. Betrayal hadn't won. Love had. And the life waiting for her, the one she built with intention, truth, and courage, was brighter than anything she had lost. Looking back, Elena would one day describe it like this. "Some people tried to break me, but all they did was show me where I was strong." Because healing doesn't come in loud victories. It comes in quiet moments. In choosing peace over bitterness. In choosing truth over approval. In choosing yourself over the people who outgrew their place in your life. Elena learned that a baby doesn't ruin a wedding, but cruel people can ruin a friendship. Love isn't proven by perfect circumstances. It's proven by who stands with you when everything falls apart. And sometimes the most beautiful wedding day is the one people tried hardest to destroy. Her story wasn't about humiliation. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about exposing toxic friends. It was about rebirth. A reminder that the people who try to dim your joy are almost always the ones who've lost their own. And when Elena walked down the aisle, glowing, loved, chosen, steady, she wasn't walking toward a wedding. She was walking into her strength, her family, her future, her peace. If there's one lesson her journey leaves behind, it's this. You don't lose real friends when you set boundaries. You lose the ones who pretended to be real. And if you love dramatic wedding confessions, bridal chaos, and stories where the truth hits harder than the betrayal, hit subscribe. Bridal Confessions has many more secrets to tell.